Okay, so let me just repeat a couple of kind of housekeeping things. First of all, as I just mentioned, please mute your phone. Participants will be in a listening mode and will not be able to ask any questions verbally. Participants may ask questions using the chat feature in the webinar. Questions will be answered during the question-answer session at the end of the webinar, and we will try to get through as many as we can as time permits. And the slides and a recording of today's webinar will be available on the NIMHD website. As far as background, the Resource Centers in Minority Institutions, RCMI, as it is called, was established by NIH in 1985 as a result of congressional interest in expanding the national capability for health sciences research. And it really was a recognition of the important role that institutions with historical commitment to diverse individuals have played in supporting scientific research. The program was managed by the National Center for Research Resources at NIH until 2012 when it was transferred to the NIMHD. RCMI has included 4 different programs: Research Centers in Minority Institutions, also known as G12, Infrastructure for Clinical and Translational Research, known as R-Centers, the RCMI Translational Research Network, and the Clinical Research Education and Career Development Program, more of a educational enrichment and training in minority institutions. This current funding opportunity announcement is the replacement for the Resource Centers in Minority Institutions program, the G12. So I just want to go over very quickly some of the important changes from the previous RCMI funding, opportunity announcements. First of all, in the future, the awards other than the educational award will be cooperative agreements. They'll be cooperative agreements because this will allow our institute to be more of a partner with the institutions and be able to utilize all the resources and technical assistance that we may have at our disposal in working with the institutions in being successful in their research projects. Eligibility is limited to institutions that receive less than $500 million on average for the past prior 3 fiscal years. There will be a 3-tiered structure with the opportunity for capacity building and research in basic, clinical, and or behavioral research. So a particular applicant can focus on one of these 3 areas, 2 of these 3 areas, or all 3 of them. There's also the inclusion of a pilot project program and at least 1 research project. Historically, the RCMI program has been very focused on building the research capacity in the institutions, and this was a very natural evolution of the program in incorporating in some research projects themselves, as well as the opportunity for more junior faculty through pilot projects to begin their career trajectory. And one of the other important changes was a consolidation of separate infrastructure-related cores that occurred in other funding opportunity announcements for the RCMI program into a single research infrastructure core. So the objectives of the funding opportunity announcement is to provide support for specialized research centers and institutions that offer doctoral degrees in the health professions or health-related sciences, and have a historical and current commitment to educating underrepresented students. The primary goals of the centers are to enhance the institutional research capacity in areas of basic biomedical, behavioral, and/or clinical research, enable all levels of investigators to become more successful in obtaining competitive extramural support, especially on diseases that disproportionately impact minority and other health disparities populations, foster environments conducive to career enhancement with a special emphasis on the development of new and early career investigators, enhance the quality of all scientific inquiry and promote research on minority health disparities, and establish sustainable relationships with community-based organizations that will partner with the RCMI institutions, in the activities that they plan to conduct. So I'm going to talk a little bit about application information. The eligibility for this funding opportunity announcement is that it's domestic institutions of higher education that have received an average of less than $50 million per year in NIH support for the past 3 fiscal years. The institutions also awards doctoral degrees in the health professions or the sciences related to health, has a historical and current mission to educate students identified as underrepresented in biomedical research, has a documented track record of recruiting, training, and or educating, graduating underrepresented students, and for institutions that deliver healthcare services, providing clinical service to medically underserved communities. It has been pointed out that I said $500 million per year. Obviously, the slide says $50 million per year. That will be a good comment for the blooper reel when we post this on the website. Okay, so excuse me. So the focus areas of the centers must have an explicit focus on one or more of the following areas: basic biomedical, behavioral, and clinical research. Now, if the applicant is focusing on behavioral or clinical research, it is expected that they will emphasize minority health and health disparities. And the focus can be demonstrated by any of the following ways. There can be one or more research projects within a focus area. There can be one or more mandatory cores having a primary emphasis on the focus area, or 2 or more mandatory cores having a joint emphasis in the focus area along with one or both of the other areas. For the investigator development core, there must be a plan that 1/3 or more of the supported pilot projects fall within that focus area. Some of the center's components. Administrative core provides administrative and logistical support for all center activities, provides career enhancement activities for the postdoctoral fellows and junior investigators, provides an assessment of each proposed activity core, and assessment of the impact of the center as a whole. Research infrastructure core provides resources to assist investigators with developing design and analysis plans for studies. This includes faculty level expertise in research methodology, specialized laboratory techniques, statistics, bioinformatics, and or health informatics. may provide linkages to other NIH-supported programs, such as the CTSAs. The core research resources must be for multiple users across varied disciplines. It can't just focus on a single investigator at your institution. Minor alterations and renovation, A&R costs, are allowed up to $500,000 in the first year only to improve research or core laboratories or animal facilities. The investigator development core essentially is provides for a pilot project program that allow researchers to generate preliminary data for subsequent submission of grant applications related to minority health disparities, or develop new techniques to better position the institution to conduct basic biomedical research. The program may support up to 5 pilot projects per year at $30,000 to $50,000 per project. There is a minimum direct cost budget allocation for the pilot project program that we expect, and that is $150,000 per year. Pilot project investigators should be at the senior postdoctoral or assistant professor level and include individuals from backgrounds underrepresented in biomedical research career. The Community Engagement Core facilitates long-term relationships with the community-based organizations to address their health-related concerns, to promote participation in research and recruitment and retention of study participants, and also to disseminate findings from research projects. The research projects may be proposed in the areas of basic biomedical research, behavioral research, and/or clinical health services research. As mentioned before, behavioral or clinical and health services research projects must emphasize minority health or health disparities. Projects may vary in scope and budget, but together they must comprise 20 to 30% of the direct cost of the entire application per year. Projects may be led by investigators of any rank, including more senior or established investigators. There is an optional recruitment core, which would support hiring of investigators who have a track record of independent research, support who can serve as mentors to early-stage investigators. The new faculty members may be provided with startup funds up to $100,000 in direct costs per year for up to 2 years. As far as awards budgets are concerned, budgets are limited to $3 million in direct costs per year. Budget requests should correspond to the number of focus areas: basic biomedical, behavioral, clinical research. The general rule of thumb here is if the application is proposing three focus areas, then the budget is up to $3 million in direct costs. For 2 focus areas, it's up to $2.25 million in direct costs, and for 1 focus area, up to $1.5 million in direct costs. If an applicant is only going to focus on less than, if they're requesting more than the anticipated levels up to the more particular focus area, up to that $3 million cap, then there needs to be a significant justification of why that particular budget is warranted for the project that is being proposed. The optional alteration and renovation costs of up to $500,000 in the first year do not count towards these direct cost limits. Now I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Marilyn Lord-Sharp, who's going to talk about the peer review of the applications.
Good afternoon. So for the peer review of application on this slide, you can see a website. It's if you are interested to be reviewers, doing some advertisement for the peer review system. So for this U54 program peer review, the application will be assessed for completeness by the Center for Scientific Review. NIMHD program staff will assess the application for responsiveness, and also the NIMHD Scientific Review Officer will assemble a panel of experts from the extramural community to peer review the application. And at least 3 assigned expert reviewers will assess the overall impact of each application based on established criteria. So the peer review criteria for the overall. So the reviewers will evaluate each application's potential to succeed, and there are 5 overall impact criteria: the significance, investigator, innovation, approach, and environment. I'm going to go through each of them. But the overall impact reflects the likelihood for the center to exert a sustained, powerful influence on the research field. And it's the peer reviewer will consider the 5 criteria, but it's not an average of the 5 criterion score. So for the significance of the center for the overall, the reviewer will look at the importance in a field, the likelihood to enhance institutional research career, likelihood for behavioral or clinical health services project to advance understanding of the disease impacting minority and other health disparity population. And it will also look at the premise. So the premise is something that is a little bit new for NIMHD, but it's very important. The NIH expects applicants to describe the general strengths and weaknesses of the prior research being cited by the investigator as crucial to support the application. For the criteria investigator, the reviewer will look if the PIs and the key personnel are suitable, experienced, and have adequate training. If it's a multi-PI, they will look if there are complementary expertise, leadership approach, and governance and organizational structure. For the innovation criteria, so they will look how novel is the center, if there are any challenge, if it's going to challenge the field of research, if it's a new concept, approaches, methodology, instrumentation, intervention, if there is improvement of what already exists, or if it's innovative for one field or in a broader sense. For the environment criteria, they will look at contribution to the success of the application, collaboration, subject population, and institutional support. And for this specific U54, they will look at the likelihood of new and early career investigator development. For the overall approach, they will look if there is appropriate strategy, methodology, or analysis, if the projects are feasible, if there are potential problems, if there are any risk, and they will look at if it's robust and unbiased. And this is also something that is a little bit new for the NIH, because so the application needs scientific rigor, which is the strict application of the scientific method to ensure robust and unbiased experimental design, methodology, and analysis, interpretation, and reporting of results. This includes full transparency in reporting experimental detail so that others may reproduce and extend the finding. This is all this information are in the website at the bottom of this slide. So also the application need to address the relevant biological variables such as sex for animal and human subject. The NIH expects that sex as biological variable will be factored into research design, analysis, and reporting in vertebrate animal and human. So you need to have also a good justification of the human subject, the sex, gender, race, ethnicity, and the inclusion of children. The selection of the project need to support the overall goal. They need to be appropriate for the overall goal. Justification of project, multiple area importance for the overall goal. They will look at the likelihood for successful help for all investigators obtaining competitive external research support, and the probability for the center to grow and maintain collaboration and partnership with the community. So also all this information are in the FOA, and I will say that it's very important for the applicant to read all the peer review section, the review section of the FOA. So for the administrative core, the reviewer will look if there is appropriate strategy for supervision and monitor progress of the proposed activities, if there is appropriate support of career enhancement for postdoctoral and junior faculty from a variety of disciplines, if there are appropriate expertise, adequate organizational and governance structure, adequate description on composition and role of the advisory community and other committee, if it's feasible and with potential problems and the risks are addressed, is it well described and detailed evaluation plan to address its utility, relevance, performance target, and objective and outcome. The research infrastructure core need to show adequacy to enhance quality and productivity of the project and pilots. They need to enhance institutional capacity, adequate for various disciplines, researcher and research project. Is it feasible? The likelihood for the new resources to be complementary and integrated to others in the institution. Is it adequate? Is it an adequate study design and analysis, methodology, statistical expertise? Is there the likelihood of core collaboration to enhance quality and productivity? Adequate background and training of the personnel? And appropriate justification and evaluation of the effectiveness of the core services. Is there adequate plan to enhance collaboration with other consortia and networks? Adequate plan and procedure to assure compliance with federal regulation and NIH policy? And is the plan is sustainable? So for the investigator development core, Is it a likelihood for the proposed activity to support the development and enhancement competitiveness of diverse investigator, especially the early stage investigator, and it needs to be in a 3 research area. Is the description of year 1 of the RCMI a good indicator of success for investigator and a strong pipeline of project? The description of investigator and development and evaluation, is it well described? Is there a compliance with federal policy and rule for human subject and vertebrate animals? The community engagement core, the likelihood for productive collaboration and partnership with community-based organizations to foster awareness of and participation in health-related research, and is there sustainability of the community-based organization to promote participation of minority health and or health disparity population in research? Is there good potential for recruitment and retention? For the research project, they will be assessed by the 5 standard criteria that were explained above, minus the specific for the overall, and this can be found in the FOA. There is also the optional core. So the recruitment core, is there adequate plan to justify the recruitment and hiring of additional research personnel to accomplish the goal of the center? Is there adequate plans to support the establishment of a recruited faculty's research program at the RCMI? And appropriate timeline of the hiring of new faculty and or staff members. Also, they will look at the likelihood for the investigator development plan to enhance the competitiveness of junior faculty and promote success as independent investigator. So this FOA also has additional review criteria, and these additional review criteria will be reviewed and will be included in a determination of the overall score, so that they are quite important. So first, the human subject. This is an important point for the NIH, and you need to make sure that you have the 5 criteria well described. An important point also is the inclusion. We need to include women, children under the age, children now are under the age of 18, and a minority. If you don't include them, you need to justify why you do not include them. There is the other criteria, which are the vertebrate animals that have 4 criteria, and you need to follow them also, and the biohazard if it is applicable. So these criteria will be included in the overall score. The additional review consideration. So these criteria will not be included in the determination of the overall score. They need to be present in the application. The select agent research, the resource sharing plan, the budget and period of support, which you will get recommendation for. There is the so quite new NIH item, that is the authentication of the key of the key biological and or chemical resources, and it's so a new point in review that is not taken into account in the overall score, but need to be included. And it represents the quality of the resources used to conduct research, which is critical to the ability to reproduce the result. And the NIH expects that key biological and or chemical resources will be regularly authenticated to ensure that their identity and validity for use in a proposed study. You can also find this information in a website that was also presented in an earlier slide. These slides just show what will be scored. So the scored, the core, administrative core, investigator development core, community engagement core, dissemination core, each will receive an impact score. And the overall also will have an impact score, plus each of the criteria will get an impact and a score. Sorry, the research project will also get a score for each of the 5 criteria. For the peer review meeting, just very briefly, so some application may be streamlined, which means they will not be discussed, and the application may undergo a selection process in which only those applications deemed to have the highest scientific and technical merit, which are generally the top half of the application under review, will be discussed and assigned an overall impact score. The final impact score based on average of all voting reviewers is multiplied by 10, and the score range is from 10, which is exceptional, to 90, which is poor. And a summary statement for all the applications that will be discussed or non-discussed will be available approximately 30 days after the review meeting. But I think, so at a certain time, you are going certainly to be able to see the roster of the review, but please do not contact the members of the review panel, and to keep confidentiality. Thank you. Dr. Stinson?
Okay, the timeline for submission, review, and selection of the Cooperative Agreement Awards. The letter intent is due February 7th. Application due date is a month later, March 7th. Peer review meeting will happen sometime in June of 2017. Council review will be August. That's the official date that aligns with the options that we have at NIH. Our institute actually has their council in September. So review of these applications will really occur within the first couple of weeks of September. And the plan is to make the awards by the end of this fiscal year, so sometime in September of 2017. There are some selected questions and answers I want to go over. Can NIMHD confirm that my institution is eligible to apply? No. NIH staff can answer questions you have about eligibility requirements, but it's the responsibility of the institution to determine if all the eligibility criteria have been met prior to submitting their application. Next question is, my institution as a whole exceeds the NIH funding limit that we have in the funding opportunity announcement, but my school is below the funding threshold. Can my school submit an application? Well, that depends. It depends on how your institution is organized. If your school or department has its own DUNS number or has its own NIH ITF number, it can serve as an applicant institution, provided all other eligibility criteria are met. Does a residency program in a hospital count towards the health-related doctoral degree requirement? No. Only institutions of higher education or higher learning are eligible based on very specific congressional language that established the RCMI program. Next question is, my institution offers health-related doctoral degrees, but not in my department. Can I be the PI on the application? This is something that would need to be negotiated within the institution, but keep in mind that RCMI activities would be expected to center around those programs that offer the health-related doctoral degrees. This is a grant program around research-related activities around health. If an institution submits more than one application, will only one application be selected for funding if they all score well in peer review? Only one application per institution will be reviewed. If multiple applications are submitted, NIMHD will request that the institution select which application we will move forward for review. A couple of questions about the particular, focus areas of your application. Can the focus area shift over the course of the grant period? The answer to that question is yes. It is not required that the center maintain the same focus area or budgets attached to them over the 5-year period. However, the funding level for the number of focal area corresponds to the yearly budget. For example, if $3 million in direct costs were requested in year 1, all 3 focus areas would need to be covered in that year. What if our research focus is truly transdisciplinary and we can't separate research activities into the 3 focus areas? NIMHD certainly welcomes the transdisciplinary approach, to RCMI activities. However, we do believe that it still should be possible to identify specific activities that correspond to one or more of the 3 focus areas. And there's an option of specifying cores and projects that address 2 or 3 areas jointly. Do all research projects and pilot projects in clinical or behavioral research have to focus on racial and ethnic minorities? Technically, no. Projects can emphasize minority health, that is, improving the health of racial and ethnic minorities, or it can focus on health disparities. The NIH-designated health disparities populations include racial and ethnic minorities, social economically disadvantaged populations, underserved rural populations, and sexual and gender minorities. Should advisory committee members be named in the application? No. The planned roles and expertise of the advisory committee should be described in the application, but it is not necessary to provide the specific names of the members. Actually, more than not necessary, we do not want you to name specific members of the advisory committee. Does each section of the research infrastructure core, for example, you may want to propose, a section on biostatistics or laboratory technologies or other type of infrastructure development, activities, have a 6-page limit? The answer to that question is no. The page limit is for the entire research infrastructure core. So you're going to have to be very clear, very concise, and very, succinct in how you describe the activities, under all of the cores that are in the application. Are there different page limits depending on the scope of the research projects? For example, if you may want to propose a more R01 level research project, and someone else may want to propose a more R21 exploratory type of research project. The answer is no. The page limit for each research project is 12 pages. But remember, this is the page limit, not the number of pages required. Projects that are smaller in scope may not require as many pages as larger projects. Next question is, should individual pilot projects be described in the application? The answer to this question is no. Sounds like we're being so negative during the webinar, but the application should describe the pilot project program. You know, how is the institution going to solicit, select, you know, support, monitor pilot projects, not the individual projects, which should be selected after the center is awarded. And someone's phone is not on mute. Thank you. Can salary support for postdocs be included in the pilot projects or other cores? The answer to that is salary support for postdocs is an allowable cost within any center component for those engaged as personnel on research projects or other center activities. Stipends and fellowships, which are associated with training programs, are not allowed in this funding opportunity announcement. Is the letter of intent mandatory? Is the letter of intent binding? No and no. The purpose of the letter of intent is to give NIMHD, particularly the review office, a sense of how many applications to expect and what type of expertise might be needed to review them. It is possible to submit a letter of intent and then not submit an application, and vice versa. We're going to turn it over now to participant questions. We've had Dr. Jennifer Alvidrez, who has been monitoring the chat line, and our grants management officer, Priscilla Grant, has also been listening to the webinar as well. So if you have questions, please submit them through the chat line, and we'll go through as many as we can, time permitting.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to provide a clarification for one of the FAQs that you just mentioned. So the question about can the focus areas shift over the course of the project, that means a planned, what you specify in the application. So you might want to have a greater emphasis on, say, clinical research in the first couple of years and then have more of an emphasis on behavioral research. Not that you can switch around what you're doing. Once you get the grant, you can just switch focus areas. So just that clarification. Some questions that have come in. Can funds be used to support IRBs and other administrative staff? So in general, the answer is yes. There's a bit of a technical issue about what things are considered direct costs versus indirect costs, and sometimes IRBs are indirect costs. So this is definitely, if you have very specific questions, to direct them to Priscilla Grant. But in general, administrative staff around the running of the center is allowed. And please mute your phone. There's a question about if we have a current G12 that lasts a little while longer, can we apply for this, or will there be another announcement in the future? So if you look at the FOA, you'll see that both new applications and renewals are allowed. So if you have a G12 and it's not, and it has a couple years remaining, you can't hold two segments of the same grant, an original, a new application and a renewal award at the same time. So there will be FOAs in the future for those, for future RCMI, U54. Let's see. Other questions? Does the specific aims page count towards the 6-page limit? No, the specific aims is always separate from the research strategy, and it's always a single page. What is the definition of racial ethnic minorities? So we use the OMB classification. So racial ethnic minorities currently include African American, Blacks, African Americans, Hispanics, Latinos, Asian Americans, American Indian, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, and other Pacific Islanders so other groups are not considered racial ethnic minorities. However, other non-racial ethnic minority groups are considered health disparity populations. So that includes rural populations, socioeconomically disadvantaged populations, and sexual and gender minority populations. Let's see. Give me one moment to sort through these questions that all came in a big batch. Are new CBOs encouraged, or is the expectation that an existing CBO be part of the community engagement process? I think that's something that is really left up to what the focus of the center is and what community partners and other stakeholders are relevant to that process. So we don't have a preference, just it needs to follow directly from what the focus of the research and the topic area is. Can you give an idea of what kind of alteration and renovation request would not be considered minor renovation? I think this is something that is best discussed on a one-on-one basis rather than giving sort of yes or no answers. So just give a call to the scientific contact or Priscilla Grant, the grants management contact, to sort that out. Okay, so just to clarify, is the page limit 6 pages per each core total or per core? It's per core. However, particularly if you have submitted G12 applications where there were a lot of different infrastructure-related cores, all of that is in one single infrastructure core that has a 6-page limit. So that is going to, if you're using some of that same material, is going to require some consolidation. Can funds be allocated for technology development and transfer or intellectual property protection by investigators? Looking around the room to see if anyone wants to answer that question. We will get back to you on that. Can funds in alteration and renovation be used for equipment? And if yes, what percentage of the A&R funds can be dedicated to equipment? So yes, part of the application, if you are applying for these funds, requires you to specify what kinds of equipment. But again, if you have specific questions, please direct those to Priscilla Grant. Are subawards for collaborators at larger institutions that do not meet the RCMI criteria possible? Subawards and collaborations are possible. However, there is going to be a preference for most of the infrastructure resources to go to the less research-intensive institutions. So if investigators or collaborators from more research-intensive institutions are involved, I think we definitely encourage that, but we want the focus of the infrastructure development and I think the pilot, the investigative development, to be focused on those in the RCMI institution. Please comment on the eligibility of SCORE, SE1, 2, 3, grantee for research or individual development projects. So there's no specific requirements related to what kinds of grants people have had. For the research sub-projects, that is up to the applicant institution to decide who is going to be the PI or multiple PIs of those research projects. For the pilot projects, the goal is to support advanced postdocs or early career faculty members. So it's up to the applicant institution to decide the individual eligibility requirements for the pilot project program. If there is more than one research project, say basic and behavioral, do they have to be related or connected? So Synergy in a center is always encouraged, so, but because the focus is really to develop infrastructure in these different areas, it's not required that they be intimately connected, though that is certainly something that is possible if you choose. In regard to faculty startup packages, can there be a junior faculty member if they have some record of research, or must they be highly experienced and successful investigators? So I think the idea here is to bring people on board who can serve as mentors and provide research opportunities for others in the institution. So if junior people have that capacity, that is possible. I think we're not looking for people who are just out of, this is not something we envision as your first faculty position. So if they have the goods to serve as a mentor and a role model as far as their funding record and their history of publications, I think that is open. Are schools of public health or public health programs eligible? Yes. I mean, if they're in institutions that meet the other eligibility requirements. So public health is definitely a health-related degree. So I should say, as long as a doctoral degree is offered. Would elderly fall into the socioeconomically disadvantaged category? So only if they're socioeconomically disadvantaged. I mean, this cuts across other demographic subgroups. So the focus has to be on if you're coming in under this category, socioeconomically disadvantaged. So regardless of other demographic characteristics like age, gender, race, ethnicity. So a focus on low SES elderly would be an appropriate focus. How will the remaining years of an R center affect consideration of an application? So for institutions that have current R centers that may have a couple years left, the primary thing we'll be looking for is that there's no overlap. So if, for example, since the R centers have a focus on clinical research, if the RCMI U54, the current application, had a focus on clinical research, we would really be looking for distinct clinical research activities and infrastructure building rather than a duplication of what's already going on in the R Center. Postdocs who are working on one of the 3 research projects, are they part of the direct costs? So I think this may be similar to an FAQ that Dr. Stinson read. So research personnel can be supported on any of the projects, whether they're research projects or pilot projects. However, there's no training, there's no dedicated training programs in this announcement. So there's no postdoctoral fellowship, but if a postdoc is working as a staff person doing the work of the grant, then they can be receive salary support. I'm not sure if I answered the gist of that question, but. Is there the expectation that CBOs be funded as part of the overall implementation plan? I think there's definitely an interest in community engaged research. So particularly that would be, we would be looking for that in the research projects and in the community core, community engagement core. But at the same time, there is definitely that focus on building capacity within the academic institution as well. Can institutional scientists directly supported by the RCMI serve on the advisory committee or other roles of the U54. So the advisory committee has different, and I'm not sure what the distinction is between the RCMI here and the U54, if those are two different things, but the advisory committee has different roles. So there are some roles that can be internal and some that are expected to be more external. So that would be a detail that could be worked out, since you don't have to actually specify the membership of the advisory board until after award. That can be worked out with the NIMHD staff. Will applications utilize assist? Yes. Is it required that they use assist, or is that just an option? It's required? Okay. Yeah, so applications will use assist, which is the electronic submission system for multi-component grants and other grants. Will you please define basic biomedical research for the purposes of this proposal? No, I'm not asking you. Would anyone here like to address that question? A definition of basic biomedical research. So I think we're not really putting restrictions on how that's defined. So, and it is also possible that the biomedical research, even if it's not clinical, does have a minority health and health disparities focus, but it's not required. Does each full research project have 12 pages, or is 12 pages the limit for 3 projects? So there's not a requirement to have 3 projects. You can decide the number of projects. But the 12-page limit is for the research strategy is for each research project, not all of them together. For programs that are currently on bridge funding from existing RCMI funding, are these considered new applications or renewal applications? So if you have an existing G12, unless you're proposing something entirely different, no? If you have an existing G12 that's either in no-cost extension or bridge funding, you would be submitting a renewal. Are R01 funded investigators, current or past, eligible to lead research projects? Yes. So the career stage or the level of prior funding for the research projects is left up to the applicant organization to sort out. It's only the pilot project program that is targeted towards the more early stage investigators. If you have a current G12, where does the progress report go? So when you look at the, it doesn't really tell you in the FOA, but if you look at the SF424 grant application instructions, you'll see that you include the progress report for renewal in the research strategies section, and note that you don't get extra pages if you submit a renewal, so it has to be included within the 12-page limit. Is affiliation with a medical school required or preferred? It's not required, and it's not preferred. It's just a possibility. And just a note that for questions that are very specific to individual grants or grantees, probably not going to address those, but those are ones you should follow up, like, are we eligible for this, or can we extend this or that, to contact your PO. So just a clarification regarding assist. Assist is a possibility, but please.
So the clarification is that Assist is one gateway to submit your application through. If you work with another system that submits multi-component applications to grants.gov, you are able to, you may also use that system. But Assist is a gateway that's open, and there is links in the RFA to bring you to the Assist program.
And that was, thank you, that was Tom Volberg, the Chief of Review. So the real answer is it's whatever your institution uses to submit multi-component grants to NIH. Okay. Regarding the page limit, do the page limits for the research strategy include the specific aims? No, the specific aims is always a separate one-page thing. I know, but you know, people really want to make sure so they don't lose a page of their narrative. Can you clarify the role of the educational activities in the administrative core, if not as a training program? So I think the training is a term that has very specific meaning to NIH. So I think the term professional development or investigative development is used not to train people to receive a degree or a certification, but really to provide the guidance necessary to successfully complete research projects and be poised to conduct research in the future. So the educational activities are all in the service of conducting research, not to complete professional development activities, mentorship. For an existing G12, do we submit a progress report as part of the application? Yes, for renewal applications, it is expected that you will submit a progress report as part of the research strategy. Can you verify that there will be no future R Center announcement? Would you like to say that?
I think that question is outside the content of this webinar.
Please give examples of how undergraduate and graduate students can be supported under this FOA. So again, this is not a training mechanism. So if undergraduate and graduate students serve as research staff or other kinds of staff related to center, they may be compensated for their work. But there are no student stipends or fellowships because those are specific to training programs. What type of information would be needed to support that our institution has a historical and current mission to educate underrepresented students? Would you like to? I think there are a couple, yeah, would you like to? There are a couple sections in the announcement, and I'm actually going to pass over to Dr. Joan Wasserman for more.
Hi, that's a good question, and it's actually outlined in the FOA. It's pretty clear under eligibility, so look at that. And if you still have questions on that, contact the I think it's Dr. Stinson, and he could help you with that. But the criteria are pretty explicit in the actual FOA.
Is there a funding limit per research project? No, I mean, I think there's that, you see in the announcement, there's a range of what all of the research projects together should fall into, but there's latitude for the applicant to identify the scale and scope and number of research projects within that a budget range. Can there be 5 PIs for 5 separate research projects? I think that how the research projects are structured is left up to the applicant, and I think we would expect that although there's no requirement, we would kind of expect that the different research projects would not all have the same PIs on them, so we would expect different PIs. An earlier question was, will this FOA support NIH-funded clinical trials? And I think this question was coming from if people have heard about some of the changes that are on the horizon about how NIH solicits, reviews, and manages clinical trials. That is set, some of those changes are set to take place later in the year, I think September 2017. So for now, NIH-funded clinical trials are allowable under this announcement. Can we use funds from alteration and renovation to purchase equipment? I think the answer was yes, but really the equipment is related to the renovation, not just general equipment, so really direct kind of your detailed questions to Priscilla Grant about that. And someone may be typing a question as we speak, because I could hear something. And I did combine some of the questions together that seemed similar, so if you had a question I did not, I kind of missed an important aspect of your question, please contact either Dr. Stinson for programmatic questions or Priscilla Grant for budget and policy questions. Okay, question, can we support minority investigators to partake in existing career development programs? So I think there's a section in the the administrative core about providing potential linkages to existing professional development and mentoring activities. So that's something that's encouraged. Again, as far as, because this isn't a training mechanism to provide salary support for people to receive that training is not necessarily going to be supported, but definitely the linkages to those other programs are encouraged. And right, and again, about the details of what's allowable and what isn't is a good Priscilla Grant question. Is external evaluation required? So external evaluation as in NIMHD will conduct an evaluation of this program in 4 years, as it states in the FOA. There's not a requirement for an external evaluator of your particular RCMI. Should, let's see. If the activities of the grant enhance the institution's ability to move students through the health-related STEM pipeline, will the proposal be considered more competitive? So I think you can see that the focus here is really on enhancing the research capacity of the faculty, with the idea that the long-term impact of this will be to provide research and mentoring opportunities for students who come through these programs. So I think this is something that you describe in related to your historical mission and your track record, but these activities themselves are not necessarily a focus of what you would be using the NIH grant funding to do. Can any of the funds be used to buy out faculty teaching time to allow them time to develop new research projects. Time to develop new research projects. I mean, I think definitely funds can be used to support faculty members who are involved in research projects. I'll just leave it at that. Do you want to add anything to that? Okay. Right, and if you have a very specific example in mind, of what you're planning to do, and it's not super clear whether it's allowable, again, contact Priscilla Grant about that. In the investigator recruitment core, that's not what it's called. In the recruitment core, the FOA limits budget to $100K for what appears to be startup costs. Can salary also be requested? So salary support is intended for people who are involved in the conduct or the execution of the center. Right. Okay, we'll follow up. Right. Okay, so for any of these things where we need to provide further clarifications, this will eventually go up on our FAQ page on our website. Can mentors receive salary support? So per policies of NIH, mentors cannot receive salary support if mentorship is part of one of their ongoing regular professional duties as a faculty member. So it depends on what the mentorship entails, right? So if it constitutes participating in the research activities, the salary support can be achieved that way. Just for being a mentor in general is not a cost, but again, contact Priscilla Grant if you have specific questions about that. Is an external internal advisory board required? Yes, and just look at the instructions. They are in the cooperative agreement terms and conditions about the expected composition of the advisory board. The $50,000 budget for pilot projects is limiting for some types of research. Is this limit flexible based on the proposal? No, I think the intent is this to provide very initial seed money to lead to future things, not for it to be kind of a full-scale research project in itself. So, so yeah, that's why that limit is there. If there are projects that are deemed to be important, those could be included as research projects in the application.
Well, it looks like we've come to the end of all the questions, and interestingly enough, I think we are within a couple of minutes to the time that was allotted for this webinar. I want to thank everybody for participating in the webinar. The webinar has been recorded, will be posted on our website within the next couple of days, and we'll also, prepare the questions and answers and have those posted as well. As any particular additional questions come to mind, please don't hesitate to call me or any other of the program staff you may know, and we'll be as helpful as we possibly can. Thanks again, and have a good afternoon or evening. Bye.